The ship hung in the darkness above a green world, stood at the observation window and watched the clouds move across the planet below. Prime, a world of endless forests and proud hunters, a world that had rejected every alien visitor for 200 years. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. In 3 hours she would walk on that soil. She would meet beings who could kill her with a single swipe of their claws, and she would have to stay calm. That was her job, stay calm. "You should eat something." Turned. Captain stood in the doorway, his arms crossed over his chest. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and worry lines around his eyes. 20 years in the diplomatic corps had taught him that first contact missions usually ended badly. "I am not hungry," he said. "You need your strength." Walked to stand beside her. He looked down at the planet with an expression she could not read. "They are not like any species we have met before. They do not think in terms of friendship or alliance. To them, every living thing is either predator or prey, nothing else." Had read the files. She had studied the reports from previous missions. The Galactic Union had sent their best diplomats to Prime. All of them had failed. Some had died. They were a proud species. They stood on 2 legs like humans, but that was where the similarity ended. Their bodies were covered in scales that shifted color with their moods. Their faces were flat and wide, with large eyes that could see in total darkness, and their hands ended in claws that could cut through metal. But the most dangerous thing about them was not their claws. It was their culture. They judged every being by how it moved, how it breathed, how its heart beat under pressure. Fear made you prey. Aggression made you a threat. There was no middle ground. "Why did they agree to meet us?" asked. "After all these years, why now?" Was quiet for a moment. "They are curious about humans. We are new to the galaxy. We have only been traveling between stars for 50 years. The other species have been watching us, trying to understand what we are." "And what are we?" "That is what they want to find out." Put his hand on her shoulder. "That is why you are here. The psychologists say you have the stress response they have ever measured. When other people panic, your heart rate stays steady. When other people run, you stay still." Remembered the tests. They had put her in dark rooms with sudden loud noises. They had shown her images designed to frighten. They had measured her blood pressure, her breathing, her brain activity. And through it all, she had stayed calm, not because she was brave. She simply could not see the point of fear. "I am not special," she said. "I just grew up differently." Nodded. He knew her history. A childhood on island, raised by a mother who worked with wild animals. A life spent learning to sit still, to wait, to let frightened creatures come to her in their own time. "Special or not," said, "you are our best chance. The matriarch has agreed to meet with a small group. You, me, and 2 security officers. We land in 3 hours." The shuttle dropped through the atmosphere like a falling stone. Sat strapped in her seat, watching the green world rise up to meet them. The forests of Prime covered everything. There were no cities that she could see, no roads, no signs of technology. But she knew they were watching. Their sensors had tracked the shuttle from the moment it left the ship. They landed in a clearing. The trees around them were massive, with trunks wider than houses and branches that blocked out the sky. The air that came through the vents smelled of earth and growing things. Stood first. Remember the briefing. Move slowly. Speak softly. Do not make eye contact for more than 3 seconds, and whatever happens, do not show fear. The ramp lowered. Sunlight poured in, green and golden, filtered through a million leaves. Walked down into the clearing and felt the soft ground under her boots. They were already there. They stood at the edge of the trees. There were 12 of them arranged in a half circle. Their scales were dark green, almost black, and their eyes caught the light like polished stones. They did not move. They did not speak. They simply watched. And at their center stood the matriarch. Was larger than the others. Her scales were marked with patterns of silver and gold, symbols of her rank. Her eyes were the color of old amber, and they held an intelligence that made breath catch in her throat. This was not a primitive creature. This was a leader, a queen, a being who had ruled her people for longer than had been alive. Beside the matriarch stood a small figure, a cub, young, curious, with scales that had not yet darkened to adult colors. The cub's eyes moved constantly, taking in everything: the strange visitors, their odd clothing, the metal shuttle behind them. Stepped forward and bowed. "Matriarch, we are honored by your welcome. I am captain of the human vessel Harmony's Edge. We come in peace, seeking only friendship between our peoples." Did not respond. Her eyes moved across the group, studying each human in turn. Felt the weight of that gaze when it reached her. It was like standing in front of a fire, feeling the heat press against her skin. The security officers were sweating, could smell it. She could see the slight tremor in their hands, the too quick movement of their eyes. They were afraid, and they knew it. Their nostrils flared. Their claws extended slightly, just the tips showing. Prey, their body language said. These creatures are prey. But when's eyes found, something changed. The matriarch's head tilted slightly to one side. Her nostrils flared again, but this time with something like confusion. Stood still, she breathed slowly. She let her hands hang loose at her sides. She was not prey, she was not a predator. She was simply there, present in the moment, asking for nothing and threatening nothing. The cub took a step forward. One of the adults hissed softly, a warning, but the cub ignored it. His eyes were fixed on, curious and unafraid. Raised one clawed hand, the other fell silent. "You may enter the grand hall," the matriarch said. Her voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "We will speak there. We will see what you truly are." She turned and walked into the forest. The other followed, and after a moment so did the humans. Walked behind, her eyes on the path ahead, but she could feel the cub's gaze on her back, curious and intent. Something had begun here, something important. She did not know what it was yet. But she would wait. She was good at waiting. The Grand Hall of Thorns was not what it expected. She had imagined something like the council chambers on Earth, with polished floors and bright lights and chairs arranged in neat rows. This was nothing like that. The hall was alive. The walls were made of living wood, twisted and woven together into patterns that seemed to move when she looked at them. Thick vines hung from the ceiling, covered in flowers that glowed with soft blue light. The floor was moss, deep and soft, and it muffled every footstep. There were no chairs. They did not sit the way humans did. They crouched on raised platforms of stone, their tails wrapped around their legs for balance. The matriarch's platform was the highest, carved with symbols that did not recognize. Stood in the center of the hall. His voice was steady as he spoke, but could see the tension in his shoulders. He was talking about trade, about shared technology, about the benefits of an alliance between humans and... They did not seem interested. They watched the humans the way a cat watches a mouse. Their eyes tracked every movement, every twitch, every breath. One of the security officers shifted his weight from one foot to the other. 3 turned their heads to look at him. Their claws extended slightly. Stood apart from the others. She had found a spot near the edge of the hall, where a fallen log provided something like a seat. She had her notebook open on her knee, recording observations. The way they communicated with small movements, the patterns in their scales that changed with their moods, the low sounds they made to each other, too quiet for human ears to understand. She was so focused on her notes that she did not notice the cub approaching. Had slipped away from his mother's side. He was young, perhaps the equivalent of a human child of 5 or 6 years. His scales were pale green, still waiting to darken with age. His eyes were huge and golden, filled with a curiosity that he could not control. He had been watching the strange visitors since they arrived, the tall one who spoke too much, the nervous ones who smelled of fear, but most of all he had been watching the quiet one, the female who sat apart. She did not smell like the others. She did not move like the others. She was interesting. Crept closer. The adults were focused on the tall human's words. No one noticed him slip between the stone platforms. No one saw him approach the strange female with the book. Felt something brush against her sleeve. She looked down. The cub was right there. He had climbed onto the log beside her and was sniffing at her arm. His nose twitched. His small claws gripped the fabric of her uniform for balance. And then one of those claws got stuck. The cub pulled. The fabric pulled back. He made a small sound of frustration and pulled harder. His claw only sank deeper into the weave of the cloth. The hall went silent. Looked up, Every was staring at her. The security officers had gone pale. His mouth was open, but no words came out. She understood instantly. This was a test. Not a planned test, but a test all the same. How she reacted in the next few seconds would decide everything. If she panicked, if she pulled away, if she did anything that hurt the cub, even by accident, the would attack. The other humans would die. The mission would fail. And humanity would make an enemy of one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. All because a curious child had gotten his claw stuck in her sleeve. Did not panic. She did not pull away. She took a slow breath and let it out. Then she looked down at the cub and smiled. Stared up at her. He had stopped pulling. His golden eyes were wide with something that might have been confusion. The strange female was not afraid. He could smell it. Her heart was beating slowly, steadily, like a stone sinking through water. She was not prey. But she was not a predator either. She made no move to grab him. She did not show her teeth. She simply sat there looking at him with soft eyes, waiting. Began to hum. It was a song her grandmother had taught her long ago on island. A simple melody, slow and gentle, the kind of song you sang to frightened animals or crying children. She did not know if they could appreciate music, but she knew that the vibration of sound could calm almost any creature. The cub's ears twitched. He tilted his head to one side, listening. The sound was strange, not like anything he had heard before, but it was not threatening. It was nice. His muscles relaxed. His breathing slowed. He stopped pulling at his stuck claw. Across the hall, Matriarch watched with eyes that missed nothing. Her own claws had extended when she saw her cub approach the human. Every instinct in her body had screamed at her to attack, to protect her child. But something had held her back. The human female had not moved. Had lived for many years. She had seen many things. She had watched other species send their diplomats to grovel and beg. She had watched warriors try to prove their strength. She had watched cowards run at the first sign of danger, but she had never seen anything like this. The human sat perfectly still. Her heart did not race. Her body did not tense. She simply existed beside the cub, as calm as a stone in a river. And when she began to make that strange humming sound, felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt curious. Minutes passed. No one in the hall moved. The only sound was soft humming and the distant call of birds outside. Yawned. His small mouth opened wide, showing teeth that would someday be deadly but were now just small and white and harmless. He was tired. The excitement of the day, the strange visitors, the stuck claw, it had all worn him out. He curled up against side. His scales were warm against her arm. His breathing slowed and deepened. And with a soft click, his claw retracted, sliding free of her sleeve as naturally as a cat pulling in its claws. The cub was asleep. Stopped humming. She looked down at the small creature pressed against her side and felt something warm bloom in her chest. He was just a child. Curious, playful, full of energy. Not so different from human children, really. She looked up. The matriarch was staring at her with an expression she could not read. Found his voice. Matriarch, I apologize for any disruption. We meant no. Silence. His voice cut through the air like a blade. She rose from her platform and walked toward, her movements slow and deliberate. The other parted before her like water before a ship. She stopped in front of. Her amber eyes studied the human's face. Her nostrils flared, taking in her scent. "You did not run," said. "No," replied. "You did not fight." "No." "Why?" Looked down at the sleeping cub. She thought about her mother, about the wildlife preserve, about all the frightened animals she had sat with over the years. "He was not trying to hurt me," she said simply. "He was just stuck. There was no reason to be afraid." Was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost wondering. "In all our history," the matriarch said, "no outsider has ever shown such stillness. You are not prey, but you are not predator either." She tilted her head, a gesture now recognized as deep thought. "What are you?" Did not have an answer. She sat there with the cub warm against her side and waited for the matriarch to decide. The cub slept against the side for almost an hour. She did not move him. She did not shift her position. She simply sat there, breathing slowly, watching the light change as the sun moved across the sky outside. They watched her, all of them. Their eyes never left her face. Some of them whispered to each other in their own language, sounds too low for human ears to catch. Others simply stared, their expressions unreadable. Stood frozen in the center of the hall. He wanted to speak, to continue the negotiations, but he knew better. Something was happening here, something he did not fully understand. All he could do was wait and trust that knew what she was doing. His mind drifted as she sat there. She thought about home, about Island with its black volcanic rocks and green forests and the endless blue sea, about her mother who had taught her everything she knew about patience. Had worked at a wildlife preserve on the eastern side of the island. Every day people brought her animals that had been hurt, birds with broken wings, deer caught in fences, small creatures that had been hit by cars and left to die, healed them all, one patient hour at a time. Had grown up watching her mother work. She learned that frightened animals could not be rushed. If you moved too fast, they would panic. If you spoke too loud, they would run. The only way to help them was to be still, to sit beside them without asking for anything, to let them understand in their own time that you were not a threat. She remembered one day when she was 12 years old. A deer had been brought to the preserve, badly injured. It was wild with fear, its eyes rolling, its legs kicking at anyone who came close. The veterinarians wanted to sedate it but said no. "Let try," she had said. The others had thought she was crazy, but they let the girl into the enclosure anyway. Sat down in the corner as far from the deer as she could get. She did not look at it. She did not speak to it. She simply sat there, quiet and still, for 4 hours. At first the deer had watched her with terror in its eyes. Every small movement made it flinch. But as the hours passed, something changed. The deer stopped shaking. Its breathing slowed. Its eyes grew calm. And finally, slowly, it walked over to her. It lowered its head and let her touch its wound. Had smiled when she told the story later. "You have a gift," she said the gift of stillness. Not everyone can sit with fear. Not everyone can wait for trust. Had not understood what her mother meant. Not then. She was just a child. She had simply done what felt natural. But now, sitting in this alien hall with a sleeping cub pressed against her side, she understood. Stillness was not the absence of fear. It was the presence of something stronger. It was the choice to stay when every instinct told you to run. The cub stirred, looked down and saw his golden eyes blink open. He yawned, showing his small white teeth, and stretched his limbs like a cat waking from a nap. His claw was free now. He probably did not even remember getting stuck. He looked up at. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Human and alien. Two creatures from different worlds, separated by millions of kilometers of empty space. Then made a sound. A soft chirp, like a bird calling for its mother. He rubbed his head against his arm, his scales warm and smooth, and then he climbed down from the log and ran back to the matriarch. Bent down and touched her forehead to her cub's forehead. It was a gesture of affection, realized, a mother greeting her child. The fierce warrior queen was also a parent who loved her son. When looked up again, her expression had changed. The cold calculation was still there, but something else had joined it, something warmer. "Come with me," she said to, alone. Stepped forward. "Matriarch, I must protest. Our protocols require." "Your protocols do not apply here." His voice was firm but not hostile. "The female will not be harmed. I give my word as matriarch." Stood, her legs were stiff from sitting so long, but she did not show it. She walked past and touched his arm briefly. "It will be fine," she said softly. "Trust me." She followed the matriarch out of the grand hall and into the forest beyond. They walked in silence for a long time. The path twisted between massive trees, over streams, through clearings where flowers bloomed in colors had never seen before. The matriarch moved with the easy grace of a hunter, her feet making no sound on the soft ground. Finally, they reached a small pool fed by a waterfall. The water was clear and still, reflecting the green canopy above like a mirror. Sat on a rock beside the pool and gestured for to sit beside her. "My people have a word," said. "It means the moment before a kill. That instant when the prey knows it is about to die but has not yet begun to run. We believe that moment is sacred. It is the truth of all living things." Listened, she did not speak. "When my cub touched you," continued, "I expected, every other species shows it, the fear that comes before flight or fight, but you," she shook her head slowly. "There was nothing, your heart did not change, your body did not tense, you simply waited." "I was not afraid," said. "No, you were afraid." Looked at her with those amber eyes. "I could smell it, faint but present, the chemicals of fear in your blood, but you did not let it control you. That is not something prey can do. It is not something predators do either. They use their fear as fuel for violence." The matriarch picked up a stone from beside the pool and turned it over in her claws. "What are humans truly? I have asked myself this question since I first heard of your species. You are soft. You have no claws, no scales, no venom. By all logic, you should be prey. But you spread across your world like a plague. You built machines that fly between stars. You survived things that should have destroyed you." She tossed the stone into the pool. Ripples spread across the surface. "And now I see one of you sit with my cub, calm as still water, and I begin to understand. Turn to face fully. You are not prey, you are not predators, you are something else, something we have not seen in a very long time." Met her gaze. "What do you mean?" "There is a legend among my people," said. "A story from the old times before we built ships to travel the stars. It speaks of beings called the Still Ones. Creatures who could sit beside death itself and not flinch, who could walk through fire and not burn, who conquered not through strength but through patience." She paused. "We thought they were myths, stories to tell cubs around the fire, but perhaps," she looked at with new eyes, "perhaps we were wrong." Did not know what to say. She thought of her mother, of the deer in the enclosure, of all the small moments of stillness that had led her to this place, this time, this impossible conversation with an alien queen. "I am just a person," she said finally. "I do not know anything about legends or myths. I only know what my mother taught me. That patience is a kind of strength, that waiting is not weakness, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply stay." Was silent for a long moment. The waterfall sang its endless song. The light filtered green through the leaves. "Yes," the matriarch said at last. "Perhaps that is exactly what the Still Ones were. Perhaps they were not gods or spirits. Perhaps they were simply beings who understood what it truly means to be brave." She rose from the rock. "Come, there is someone you must meet." The path led deeper into the forest. The trees grew older here, their trunks so wide they could not see around them. The air smelled of ancient earth and growing things. Strange birds called from the branches above, their songs echoing through the endless green. walked ahead, her silver-marked scales catching the scattered light. She did not speak. She did not need to, understood that they were going somewhere important, somewhere sacred. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing. At its center stood a tree larger than any had ever seen. Its trunk was the size of a small building, its branches spread out like arms embracing the sky, and at its base, carved into the living wood, was a doorway. "The elder waits within," said. "He has lived for 500 of your years. He is the keeper of our history. When I told him of you, he wished to see for himself." Stepped through the doorway. The inside of the tree was hollow but not empty. Shelves had been carved into the walls, filled with objects did not recognize. Bones and stones and pieces of metal, carvings and crystals and things that seemed to glow with their own light. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and something else, something sharp and clean, like lightning. And in the center of it all sat the elder. Was ancient. His scales had faded to gray, and deep lines marked his face like cracks in old stone. But his eyes were bright, burning with an intelligence that made catch her breath. He sat cross-legged on a platform of woven vines, his tail curled around him, watching her with an expression she could not read. "Come closer," he said. His voice was rough and dry like wind through dead leaves. "Let me see you properly." Walked forward until she stood before him. She did not bow, she did not kneel. She simply stood there, calm and still, and let him look. Studied her for a long time. His eyes moved across her face, her hands, her body. He breathed in deeply through his nostrils, taking in her scent. He made a low sound in his throat, something between a growl and a hum. "Told me what you did," he said finally. "She told me how you sat with the cub, how your heart stayed still, how you waited." He tilted his head. "Tell me, human, have you always been this way?" Thought about the question. "I think so," she said. "My mother taught me patience when I was very young. She worked with animals, frightened animals. She showed me that stillness could be a gift." Nodded slowly. "A gift," he repeated. "Yes, that is a good word for it." He gestured to the shelves around them. "Do you know what these are?" Looked, the objects seemed random. A piece of twisted metal, a smooth black stone, a fragment of something that might have been a machine. "I do not know," she admitted. "They are memories," said, "pieces of our history. Some are thousands of years old, some are older still." He reached out and picked up a small carving from the shelf beside him. It was made of dark wood, worn smooth by countless hands. It showed a figure did not recognize, not a something else. "This is the oldest object in my collection," said. "It was carved before my great-great-grandmother was born, before we built ships, before we knew there were other stars." He held it out to. "Do you know what it shows?" Took the carving carefully. The figure was strange. It had a body like a, but its posture was different. It sat cross-legged, its hands resting on its knees, its eyes closed. There was something peaceful about it, something calm. "This is a still one," said. "The legend mentioned. In the old days before we became the hunters we are now, our ancestors knew beings like this. They were not. They came from somewhere else. No one remembers where." He took the carving back and held it gently, reverently. "The still ones taught our ancestors many things. They showed us how to grow food instead of just hunting. They helped us build our first villages. But most importantly, they taught us a different way of being, a way that did not require killing." His eyes grew distant, lost in memory. "For a time our people lived in peace. We hunted only what we needed. We fought only when we had to. The still ones sat with us around our fires and shared their wisdom. They were patient. They were kind. They waited for us to learn, never pushing, never demanding." "What happened to them?" asked. Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with old grief. "They left. We do not know why. Perhaps they had other worlds to visit, other peoples to teach. One day they were there and the next they were gone. They left behind only stories and this carving." He set the figure back on its shelf. Without them, our people changed. We forgot the old ways. We became hunters again, killers. We conquered our world and then reached for the stars. We judged every species we met by our new standards, predator or prey, nothing else. Looked at with those bright, ancient eyes. But I never forgot the stories. I kept them alive, passed them down from elder to elder for 500 years. I always hoped, he paused, I always hoped that someday the still ones would return. Understood then. She understood what had seen in her, what this ancient keeper of memories was seeing now. You think humans are like them, she said, the still ones. I think, said carefully, that you have the same gift, the ability to sit with fear and not be ruled by it, the patience to wait for trust instead of demanding it. He leaned forward. Tell me, human, is this common among your people, this stillness? Thought about her world, about the billions of humans scattered across Earth and its colonies, about all the different ways they lived and loved and fought and dreamed. Not everyone, she said honestly. We have our share of violence. We have fought wars that killed millions. We have been cruel to each other in ways I cannot even describe. She paused. But we also have teachers, healers, people who choose patience over anger, people who sit with the frightened and the wounded and help them find peace. Nodded, yes, that is what the still ones were, not perfect, not gods, simply beings who chose one path when another was easier. He rose from his platform, his old joints creaking with the movement. Was right to bring you to me. He walked to the doorway and looked out at the forest. For 200 years we have rejected every species that came to our world. They all failed the same test. They showed fear when they should have been calm. They showed aggression when they should have been patient. But you, he turned to look at. You sat with a cub who had his claw in your sleeve and you hummed him to sleep. The old elder made a sound that might have been a laugh. The Galactic Union has sent us warriors and diplomats, scientists and merchants. None of them understood us. But you, a young female who grew up tending wounded animals on a small island, you understood perfectly. He walked back to and placed one clawed hand on her shoulder. His grip was gentle, almost fatherly. I am going to give my recommendation, he said. I am going to tell her that humans are not prey. They are not predators. They are kin who wait. The old term, the term we used for the still ones before they left us. Felt tears prick at her eyes. She did not fully understand the weight of what she was being told, but she understood that something important was happening, something that would change everything. What does that mean? She asked. Kin who wait. Smiled. It was a strange expression on his alien face, but somehow recognized it. It means family, he said. It means we will wait for you as you waited for us. It means that after 500 years, the still ones have finally come back. 6 months later, the treaty was signed. Stood at the back of the great hall on Earth Station Harmony, watching as captain and matriarch pressed their hands together in the traditional gesture of alliance. Cameras from 100 worlds recorded the moment. Diplomats and journalists filled every seat. The air hummed with excitement and disbelief. For 2 centuries, they had rejected every offer of friendship. They had killed ambassadors from the most powerful species in the galaxy. They had been declared unreachable, untouchable, a force to be avoided at all costs. And now they stood side by side with humans, pledging eternal friendship. Did not like the attention. In the months since that day in the Grand Hall, she had become famous. News networks called her the woman who sat still. Diplomats studied recordings of her interaction with the cub, trying to understand what she had done. Psychologists wrote papers about her unusual stress response. But just wanted to go back to work. After the ceremony, she slipped away from the crowds and found a quiet observation deck overlooking the stars. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and watched the distant lights burning in the darkness. You are hiding. She turned, stood in the doorway, his scales now darker than they had been 6 months ago. He was growing. Soon he would be an adult, a warrior like his mother. but his eyes still held that same bright curiosity. "I am not hiding," said. "I am resting." Made a chirping sound that she had learned was laughter. He walked to stand beside her, his clawed feet clicking softly on the metal floor. "Mother says you are uncomfortable with fame," he said. "She says you would rather sit with animals than speak to crowds." Smiled. "Your mother is very wise." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars together. Presence was warm beside her, familiar now in a way it had not been before. They had spent many hours together over the past months. She had taught him human games. He had shown her how to hunt in the forests. A strange friendship had grown between them. "I remember that day," said quietly, "in the grand hall when my claw got stuck." Looked at him. "You were very young." "I remember the song you sang, the humming." He made the sound himself, a low vibration in his throat that was close to her grandmother's melody. It made me feel safe. I had never felt that way with a stranger before. Did not know what to say. She simply stood there, present and listening, the way she always did. "My mother told me what elders said," continued, "about the still ones, about how humans have the same gift." He turned to look at her with his golden eyes. "I think he was right. I think your people are special." News of the treaty spread across the galaxy like fire. The other species did not understand. They were supposed to be impossible. They were supposed to be savage hunters who saw everything as either threat or food. How had the humans, new to the galactic stage, achieved what empires millions of years old had failed to do? The recordings from the Grand Hall were studied again and again. Military analysts looked for hidden weapons or secret technology. Diplomats searched for manipulation or deception. They found nothing. Just a woman, sitting still, humming a song while a cub's claw was stuck in her sleeve. It should not have worked. It was too simple, too human. But it had worked. And slowly, carefully, other species began to reach out to humanity. They came first. They were a crystalline species, ancient and proud, who communicated through patterns of light. They had been at war with their neighbors for 10,000 years, and nothing had been able to stop the bloodshed. But they had heard about the woman who sat still, and they wondered if perhaps humans could help. Was sent as part of the diplomatic team. She spent 3 months on their world, learning their language of light, studying their history of conflict. And when the time came for peace talks, she did what she had always done. She sat, she waited, she listened. The war ended 6 months later. Then came the beings who called themselves the Endless Night, species that had been at each other's throats for longer than human civilization had existed. One by one, they came to humanity, asking for help. And humanity helped. Not with weapons, not with threats, not with the promise of reward or the fear of punishment. They helped the way had helped the cub, with patience, with presence, with the simple willingness to sit beside fear and wait for it to fade. The galaxy had seen many empires rise and fall. It had witnessed wars that destroyed entire star systems. It had known species that ruled through terror and species that manipulated through deception. But it had never seen anything like humans. They called them many names. The patient ones, the still ones returned, the species that conquered not through strength but through waiting, and wherever humans went, peace seemed to follow. Years passed. Grew older. Her hair turned gray and lines appeared around her eyes. She had refused every promotion offered to her, preferring fieldwork to politics. She had helped end 17 conflicts, built relationships with over 50 species, and trained a generation of human diplomats in the art of stillness. But she always returned to Prime. The garden was quiet in the evening light. Sat on her favorite bench, watching the flowers bloom in colors that still amazed her after all these years. The air smelled of earth and growing things, familiar now as the smell of home. Footsteps approached, heavy, confident, but somehow still gentle. She smiled without turning. "Hello." The warrior sat beside her. He was fully grown now, his scales dark green and marked with the silver patterns of a commander. He had led his people's forces in 3 defensive campaigns and had earned the respect of the entire Galactic Union. But when he looked at, his eyes were still those of the curious cub who had climbed onto her bench all those years ago. "I brought someone to meet you," he said. A small figure peeked out from behind's legs, a cub, even younger than had been when they first met. Her scales were pale gold and her eyes were huge with wonder. "This is Myra," said, "my daughter." Felt her heart fill with warmth. "Hello, Myra." The cub stared at her. She had heard stories about this human. Everyone had. The woman who had sat still when the entire galaxy expected her to run. The woman who had changed everything with nothing but patience. Myra crept closer. She sniffed at sleeve, just as her father had done so long ago. And then, with the easy trust of the very young, she climbed onto the bench and curled up against side. Her small claw caught in the fabric of sleeve. Tensed, he reached forward to pull his daughter away. "It is all right," said softly. She looked down at the cub pressed against her side. She felt the familiar catch of the small claw in her clothing. And she smiled, remembering another day, another haul, another moment when everything had hung in the balance. She began to hum. Watched as his daughter's eyes grew heavy. The same melody that had calmed him so many years ago now calmed his child. The same stillness, the same patience, the same gift. Myra yawned. Her claw retracted naturally as she relaxed. She pressed closer to his warmth and closed her eyes. Sat down on his other side. For a long time, they simply sat there together, watching the flowers bloom and the stars appear in the darkening sky. "Thank you," said quietly. Looked at him for what? For everything. He gestured at the garden, the sky, the galaxy beyond. For sitting still when no one else would. For showing us what patience truly means. For giving my people a different way to see the universe. Thought about her mother. About Island. About the wounded deer she had sat with when she was 12 years old. She thought about all the small moments of stillness that had led her here, to this garden, to this evening, to this sleeping cub against her side. "I did not do anything special," she said. "I just waited." Made his chirping laugh. "Yes, and that is exactly what makes you special. You just wait. While everyone else runs or fights or gives up, you wait, and somehow that changes everything." The stars burned bright above them. Somewhere out in the darkness, ships carried humans to distant worlds, bringing their strange gift of patience to species that had never known peace. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely, one moment of stillness at a time. Looked down at the cub sleeping against her side. She felt the warmth of beside her. She heard the soft sound of wind through the flowers and the distant call of birds settling in for the night. Some things, she thought, are worth being still for. She closed her eyes and let the evening wash over her. The galaxy could wait. The universe could wait. Right now there was only this moment, this breath, this peace. And that was enough. It had always been enough.